The game begins with reading a message that reads, "You have been assigned to a being called the Batter. The Batter is on a mission. Be sure that it's accomplished. We will let you both out in Zone 0. Good luck. For more information, find the one called the Judge." So we start out in Zone 0 and meet this weird looking cat. The conversation goes, "There cannot be any living beings in Zone 0. Hence, I deduce that you are a pure figment of my imagination. Nevertheless, I will introduce myself. I am the Judge, and I am aching to know your name, dear illusory interlocutor. I'm the Batter. I've been entrusted with a sacred mission. It is a pleasure, although it was not the body I was addressing, but the soul that it harbors. What is your name, controller?" Her name is Anna. She can't talk to us. However, she can see and hear everything. Even though you two are but an imaginary specter in my eyes, let it be said that I am delighted to meet you as well, dear Anna. The Batter asks for the Judge's help, stating he has a sacred mission to fulfill, to purify the world, and the Judge offers assistance. The Judge also realizes that the Batter is the first living being it has encountered in this place, saying it assumes Zone 0 was an empty land. The Judge tells us there are other zones, and in them, hostile specters. Zone 0 is pretty much a tutorial island where we learn to fight and solve puzzles. To leave, we use our save point, which leads to the world map, a kind of unsettling space between the zones called nothingness. Zone 1 begins with meeting the Elson, who are kind of like the ordinary citizens of the zones. They come off a little creepy since every time you talk to them you hear this weird sigh. We take the tramway to the first area of Zone 1 where someone welcomes the Batter to the smoke mines. The Batter explains he's come here to exterminate the impure spirits. The worker is a little confused, asking if he's maybe an inspector, a prophet, or a man of belief. When asked who sent the Batter, he replies, "Nobody. I'm being led by Anna." The worker replies, "I don't know her. She must be a member of the superior personnel." Little did I know just how much fourth wall breaking would be ahead of me. Then the worker begins explaining, "You are here in the smoke mines of Damien in the south of Zone number 1. Here we send laborers into deep tunnels to unearth metal from the ground, freeing trapped smoke from the depths. Using various tools, we put some of it into bottles, which the Queen sends to the other zones. The rest of it flows free and forms the air that our lungs inhale and exhale, so we can live. It's an essential element, the first among the 4 elements. Because without smoke, people will have nothing to breathe." The worker explains the specters are preventing them from working and asks the Batter to go kill them. Before doing so, we can talk to the other Elson in the area who give off the impression that they are very by the book. One talks about getting promoted, another about how they can't work because of the specters, and another wonders how the Batter was allowed inside in the first place. When the Batter enters the mines, he says, "Show yourselves, corrupted children. I'm the voice of forgiveness that'll eliminate your ill-fated forms. Prepare yourselves to receive my judgment." The mines are where we encounter our first taste of battle, where we get to see how odd and unique the character designs are in this game, along with some funky combat music. Passing through the mines, we run into another Elson who says there are specters in the cowsheds too. They explain, "You are here at the metal farmsteads of Pentel in the east of Zone 1. Our work consists of cutting livestock in two and extracting the metallic rocks contained within the cadavers. All the metal of poor quality is discarded, forming the ground we walk on. The rest is purified and processed to create objects. A part of it is also put into crates and sent to the other zones, so they have objects and soil as well, I suppose. It's an essential element, the first among the 4 elements. Because without metal, people would have nothing to walk on and they would sink and drown." So we have our second element, metal, which acts as, I guess, earth and used as a raw material. Metal is extracted from livestock. You can actually see some of the workers doing this work on sliced up cows. One even says they eat the meat after they do the metal work. The Elson anxiously asks the Batter to take care of the specters in the cowsheds first since the Queen's inspector is coming, and he's like, "Alright, fine." After doing that, we see a conversation between an Elson and this scary looking figure. The Elson explains that the root individual was Dedan, the Queen's inspector. So I know if I'm pronouncing anything wrong, sorry in advance. The Batter deems him an evil specter in his eyes and that he must destroy him, even though the Elson is like, you need to chill. We go back to the mines to clear the specters when we run into another character named Zachary. This guy just loves breaking the fourth wall, doesn't he? Right after, we run into another Elson who explains, you are here at the plastic administrations of Shachihara in the north of Zone 1. Our work consists of filling in forms. Afterwards, we package them and wrap them up with string to send them to the courier service. There, they ship the packages, and in exchange, we receive parcels full of plastic. There is a lot of liquid plastic that forms our lakes and oceans. And then there is solid plastic used to make various objects. It's an essential element, the first among the 4 elements. Because without plastic, the world would be limitless, and people would keep walking and walking without ever stopping. Plastic is the 3rd element, and it acts pretty much as water in this world. We then enter the building where they do the shipment work, where the Elson just chant back form and stamp numbers. The judge on the roof tells us the building is filled with specters, so of course our devoted Batter is set on purifying the place. But our first combat in the building isn't with the specter, but an Elson. Another Elson becomes hostile towards us after reaching the elevator. The elevator takes us to the director's office where we find Dedan fighting specters. Obviously, we're going to do the exact opposite thing he just warned us not to do, which is to take the tramway to Alma. Based on previous conversations with the Elson, it seems Alma is a coveted place to be. One Elson worker talks about hoping to be transferred there, and another even mentions going there when we kill them. It's where Dedan is that can only be accessed with authorization. There's an Elson blocking the way at the entrance of Alma who attacks us after answering his questions right and just says, "My nails are all dirty," when dying. This puzzle is also packed with religious symbolism, something that is sprinkled throughout the entire game. An Elson welcomes us to Alma and like clockwork explains, you are here at the meat fountains of Alma in the center of Zone 1. Here, meat flows freely, endlessly filling these immense metal pools in which we find ourselves. Our work consists of pouring this meat into bottles before the fountains overflow. The meat is then sent to everyone, to those living in Zone 1 and the others. It's an essential element, the first among the 4 elements, because without meat, people would have nothing to eat and they would devour each other. Then the conversation goes, the other Elson in the area also attack us once talking to them. We reach Dedan's office after getting through the meat fountains. And that's Zone 1. Quick note, if you haven't realized by now, this is a very strange game with lots of symbolism and open to much interpretation. This game has so many different ways to comprehend it, I didn't even think there was really a point to researching what the devs confirmed or debunked lore-wise, because I think a part of the experience of playing a game like this is walking away with your own interpretation of the events. Of course, I did do some research that I'll mention throughout the video that I did just for me to better understand the game, but this is all just to say don't take everything that I say to be 100% fact-checked and confirmed. Anyways, revisiting Zone 1, we learned a lot about the universe of Off in this zone. There's a queen and her envoy Dedan who is the guardian of the zone. It seems he makes sure everything runs smoothly here, quite harshly. The zone is primarily made up of the essential Elsen workers who specialize in jobs needed for their society to survive. They're clearly dedicated to their jobs, almost to an obsessive extent. We learned the Elsen were unable to work due to the specters, so the batter purifies the land with absolute conviction. But as we got deeper into the zone, the Elsen themselves became mad and hostile, and we started to eliminate them as well. Some of them attacked us out of fear, some out of confusion, and some talked as if they were being freed as we defeated them. Dedan accuses us as being responsible for the specters, while the batter declares Dedan to be a specter. In the end, the batter ends up eliminating him and Zone 1 becomes purified. For now, let's just ignore the random baby after this fight. So what was the deal with the 4 elements? We learned the essential elements to life in this world were smoke, metal, plastic, and meat. They pretty much act as oxygen, earth, water, and food, respectively, comparing them to the real world. In Zone 1, the Elsen do the commendable work of making sure they have these elements to survive. Mining rocks to breathe, extracting livestock for earth, working the postal service for water, and packaging meat for food. The existence of Zone 1 essentially means life itself for the people of this world. What's weird here is the element themselves. How would humans think of these elements making up the essence of life? What do smoke, metal, plastic, and meat have in common? Depending on who you ask, it can be perhaps pollutants, byproducts, industrialization, commercialization. So essentially the exact opposite of what we think natural life consists of. Meat, I think, isn't as strong of a case here, but I think it could serve to be the antithesis of greenery, nature, plants, especially if we're talking about diet. Besides the obvious commentary on capitalism and its consequences, I think another point Zone 1 presents is what the Elsen consider to be good, life, creation, we humans could consider to be bad, death, destruction, which all leads to this theory of perhaps this game's presentation on the concept of the duality of life versus death, good versus evil, creation versus destruction, right versus wrong, on versus off. And who is to say in the case of Zone 1 and the batter / us, which side is the good and which side is the bad? Zone 2 is a place called Bismarck, and it starts with a giant library made up of a bunch of fake books and shelves. The front desk person says something about someone tearing out pages of books, so they blocked off a floor. The worker also mentions the building is full of specters, so the batter says he will eliminate them. Exploring the place, we do find some real books like this one that give some interesting context. It's an index that mentions things like the creation of the modern world, the queen and her son, and the Toad King and the merchant. There's this book that just says, I've run out of oxygen. Another book is a story about how a masked man killed an evil king called the Toad King. This particular book says, for afterwards she instated 3 guardians, responsible for watching over the zones. The Firebird was designated Lord of the Second Zone, the eternal city of Bismarck. He was the tallest, the most beautiful, and the most just. So considering Dedan was the first guardian appointed by the queen, we can presume the second guardian to be a Firebird. We then begin putting together books with torn pages as part of a puzzle. It's barely legible, so I had to look it up, but once the book is assembled together, it apparently reads, this is the story of the 3 guardians, chosen by the queen to rule over the zones, islets of life and the nothingness of this world. The first, Dedan, was tall and short of temper. His firmness of character and his body of steel ensured him supreme reign over his zone. The second, Japhet, was kind and generous. Always smiling benignantly, he was beloved by all. He always went off in all different directions, never ceasing to give more security to his subjects. The third, Enoch, was cold and just. He produced a 5th artificial element in his zone, sugar. His people became addicted to this magical substance. They were happy but disconnected from reality. Arcane legends tell of the queen, living by her father's side in the room, engendering the phantoms to destroy the world that they themselves have created. Some say she is beautiful like the heart of the sun, others are certain she is invisible. All of this is evidently nothing but unfounded speculation. Putting this book together gives us access to the upper floors where we run into another character. So this obviously goes against what we read. Japhet isn't a beautiful firebird and isn't a kind soul who values security. In fact, he's using the specters sent by the queen to restore justice to this zone. Afterwards, we run into the judge who tells us there's specters in the mall. The mall is a big maze with posters advertising the essential elements. This one sign says, "Welcome to the Gomez Galleries. May nothing stop your frenetic thirst for consumerism." We run into the judge here where he says he's looking for his brother Valerie. Valerie has been in Zone 2 for years and is on the roof of the library, which the judge can't reach, so he asks us to say hi if we run into him. Exiting the mall leads us to the amusement park. The Elsen here are too scared to do anything, even pretending to ride a fake roller coaster which is just sitting in chairs. We play the balloon game that leads to this person attacking us when we win, which causes all the Elsen to freak out because now they're scared of the specters being here. You can ride the real roller coaster, and unfortunately I forgot to ride it with the Zachary statue placed here, but you can get a cute photo after riding this ride. Zachary is apparently the boss who runs this place. Exiting the amusement park leads to the residential area. We take care of the specters terrorizing the residents and some of the residents themselves who attack us out of fear. Even after helping out the residents, we get kicked out because they think the batter is too dangerous. Then we run into the judge again. He says his brother Valerie is acting crazy and is pretending to be Japhet while claiming to be the royal representative and the leader of the specters. He joins us to find Valerie on top of the library roof. On the way there, we solve another book puzzle that, once assembled, reads, "In drawing from the last of his waning forces, he created the library, more beautiful even than it had ever been before. As its height pierced the clouds of smoke in the sky, he took his place. He had done everything for them, like the most benevolent of guardians. He had given them peace, security, and several means of having fun. Such was the greatness of his generosity. For a while, all was well for all, and they enjoyed the land that was created for them with the most childish innocence. They were running through the streets, amazed by so many. But the dynamics of this world soon escalated into madness. They started to forget their joys, descending in a spiral of fear and mindless worries. They had ... As for the firebird, he wept on his lonesome throne, saddened by the oblivion into which his subjects had made him fall. They now had time for naught but their own worries. And so the firebird became a cat, and the cat became a tyrant. Led by his wrath and sadness, he let a gale of ominous spirits rain down upon his subjects. His madness blinded him from ... And as the specters were destroying the world for him that he had himself created, he sought refuge at the summit of his most wonderful creation, the great library of Bismarck. There remained naught but to await the purifier, the man who would rise up to destroy him. For at the bottom of his soul, he knew what he had done was evil. The end. We find our lovely Zachary breaking the fourth wall again before finally confronting Valerie/Japhet. And that's Zone 2. Zone 2 was primarily a place of leisure for the Elsen, as opposed to Zone 1 where every single person there was working some sort of job. There's a library, a mall, and an amusement park for the residents to enjoy. However, even leisure and entertainment is kind of twisted in this zone. The library has mostly fake books, there's no one at the cluttered mall besides a lost person trapped here because of the specters, and the amusement park is filled with people too scared to even enjoy anything. Like Zone 1, this zone is also made up of a few Elsen that were driven mad and attacked us out of fear or frustration. We also learned a lot about the universe through the books we read. First, we learned that the creation of the modern world preceded the Queen appointing the 3 guardians of the zones. Zone 2 was ruled by Japhet, the Firebird, who originally ruled with selflessness, peace, kindness, fun, and security in mind. However, the people became worried, cautious, and scared. This made Japhet spiral and become the tyrant we saw leading up to the battle, somehow taking control of the judge's brother Valerie at the same time. The book writes as if the battle coming up to eliminate Japhet was destined to happen, as he knew what he did was wrong. The only way for the corruption to end was for the batter to kill Japhet and the land be purified. This story is quite honestly a little sad. Even a leader who is beautiful, kind, and beloved by all couldn't escape the downfall of his rule. The land he created was destined to be destroyed. Or perhaps another way of looking at it is, despite being a selfless leader, the system was set up so the failure of the king and its kingdom was inevitable, unavoidable. It's almost a depressing message that seems to say, none of it matters. What was the point? The batter rejects their attempt at redemption and sees elimination and purification as the only path to salvation. We arrive in Zone 3 and this is where things start to get really freaky. It's set in a big factory with 4 areas. Zachary is here disguised as the judge, who he mentions is named Pablo. He says Pablo isn't in great shape right now, so he's replacing him as a regular guide. This makes sense assuming he just saw his brother Valerie get killed back in Zone 2. Zachary tells us to go check out the dorms where there are specters. Interestingly, on the way there, we run into Elson, who for once aren't scared of the specters. The Elson in general here are odd. They talk as if Zone 3 is a utopia in an almost trance-like state. But then this happens. This is the first time we see the specters actually kill an Elson. We report our findings to Zachary, who tells us to head to the treatment rooms. The posters here have memos that generally say do your job well and you'll be rewarded with dessert. One of the Elson in the factory says, if I pierce the pipes, I could make some of it come out. But if it broke loose, I would never get any of it again. Another says, the director said if we work properly, we'll keep getting it. All the better, once you work their job wholeheartedly. If you remember what the book back in Zone 2 mentioned about this zone, the people here are addicted to sugar. Now we're seeing firsthand just how dependent they are. We then make it deeper into the factory. After eliminating the Elson who've gone mad, Zachary tells us to go to Area 3 because logic obliges us to start with the 3rd before trying the final one. We are in a video game, need I remind you? All the Elson on the way back have become hostile now that their precious sugar is under attack. One even denies it being the specters and accuses us of being the culprit. After getting to Area 3, we climb a really long ladder and jump inside the factory chimney. So we just learned that sugar is made from dead people, and the Elsen here are highly addicted to it. So addicted that it doesn't matter the source. They work for it every day unfazed, and without it, they would no longer be able to bear reality and would go mad. The symbolism goes crazy. Our goal is to find the director in Area 4, so we meet Zachary at the tram station to get there.
Meow. Meow.
We split up with Zachary once getting to Area 4, and this place is unsettling to say the least. What the hell? A random music box is found in the halls here. You can exchange it with Zachary for a clue, but the clue is actually in the readme files for the game if you wanted to keep the box. The clue is used to solve this puzzle where you input buttons into a bloody controller. After that, we finally get to the hall that leads to the director. and that's Zone 3. Zone 3 is where we see the world's corruption and the Elson's madness in their worst form. The Elson are brainwashed and disconnected from reality, just as the book from Zone 2 mentioned. They work to the bone to satiate their addiction, even considering vandalizing the factory for it. We can't ignore the fact that they don't even care that sugar is made from burning corpses. It doesn't matter though, because in the end, as long as they work hard and get their sugar, they're happy. And then there's the director of the factory, Enoch, the guardian of Zone 3. He claims the queen sent us to purify him, but denies being responsible for the phantoms. This is something we read about in Zone 2, and mentioned how the queen herself is engendering the phantoms to destroy the world that they themselves have created. We know this all doesn't matter to the batter though. Whether the guardian is responsible or not, they're gonna be purified. Enoch says this fortress of happiness is his defense against the specters. He understands that the specters are a threat to the Elson, unlike the Elson themselves. Then he makes an interesting note that he thinks the specters are dead people's souls. But this Elson we meet in the dorm says, the director told us that the specters are nice. It must be true. So Enoch understands how dangerous the specters are, but he tricks the people into thinking they're friendly. This would enable the 6th cycle of sugar production to continue. He still wants to rule over this fake utopia, like the god he claims to be. Perhaps the specters are vengeful spirits of the Elson who haunt this place, and that's why they aren't disappearing like Enoch said. Zone 3 symbolically exemplifies the corruption and sadistic nature of capitalism and the control it has over people. Like the other 2 zones, the only way for the suffering to end was for the land to be purified. Enoch warns the end of him is the end of the people here with no exception. It's an unforgiving way out with no hope of redemption or reparation. Before heading to the final section of the game, let's revisit the now purified zones. The purified zones can only be described as bleak. Only black and white colors make up the zones, most signs are devoid of text, only these weird looking creatures exist in battle, and the zones are pretty much completely deserted. I'll just play out the music so you get a sense of how unsettling it is. It almost sounds like someone is trapped and asking to be let out. On the roof of Zone 2's library, we finally meet the judge again. He's clearly depressed over the loss of his brother. There's only one Elson left alive who just says, the phantoms are gone. The color is gone. Everything is gone. I'm now forever safe. Zone 0 is the only zone that seems normal. Makes sense since we never purified this zone. Except this time we meet Sugar. I actually had no idea Sugar was an optional boss while fighting. I was just thinking to myself, this is a really long boss fight. Turns out this is the hardest boss of the entire game. When the batter wins, Sugar says, say goodbye to Zachary for me. If you talk to Zachary afterwards, he just says, I honestly have no idea what that was all about. We're finally at the final arc of the game as we enter the zone called The Room. It's split into chapters and begins with Chapter 5, The Room. It's a dark, ominous area made up of various halls that change as we traverse it. The room with a bed in it has a poster that says, I don't like this place very much. It's a good thing that Papa is here. Today we played together. He gave me a comic. He told me that I was ill, so I take pills. A lot of strange sequences happen as we explore the place. After reading the poster the first time, the bedroom changes slightly and now the poster reads, I don't like the pills. Exiting the bedroom leads us to a hallway that looks like the whole map was scribbled. Even the music sounds like someone drawing with a marker. Exiting the hallway, we read text that says, Papa said we'll go play outside tomorrow. Then chapter 4 called I Had 3 Friends begins. We find this scribbled map that leads us to various locations. Entering the spot called the Tall Mister, we find a cabin where it looks like Dedan is. He says, Entering the spot called the Big Mister, we find what looks like Enoch in a hole. He's stuck and asks us to find some help to get him out. He says he'll reward us with some delicious cake and jokes afterwards in exchange. Entering the spot called the Bird, we find a bird resembling Japhet who doesn't care to help out Enoch. So we go back and pick up a calendar page with the date on it and give it to Dedan. Then give the book Dedan gives us to Japhet. We meet our friends back in the cabin. The final spot is called Mama, and all it is reading text that says, Chapter 3 is called The World in a Window. What? We go through some strange rooms and puzzles as usual. The poster in the bedroom says Papa gave me a music box today. It ends with text that says, "Today, Papa gave me a comic, but I want to go out and play. I hate this place. I'm sure Mom will pick me up." Chapter 2 is called Boxer's Adventures. There's really no way to describe this chapter, so I'm just going to play it out. Zachary tells us this is the last save point of the game, and the last thing he says to us is a Latin phrase that means he conquers twice who conquers himself when he is victorious. We enter chapter 1, the Queen. Oh, shit. I can't play the credits music since it'll definitely get copyrighted, but of course after they were over, I went back for the second ending. The only difference with the credits here is that we see the judge roam around the different zones and in a completely blank space. So how do we make sense of everything we just saw? Here's what I think happened. Once upon a time, there was a child named Hugo. Hugo was a sick child with divorced parents. He would often see his father, who would give him things like comics and a music box, but this wasn't enough to maintain their bond. Hugo thought things like the comic was stupid and eventually grew to dislike his father. He would also often wait for his mother to come pick him up. He was neglected by both parents. His sickness forced him to stay in his room all the time, and he saw it as his own personal prison. Eventually, he created his own world that was built upon the failure of the previous universe, dreamt of to be a utopia where fun and happiness ruled the world. But he couldn't do this alone. When he said he made some friends, he literally created them. Each friend filled a void inside Hugo. Dedan was a motivated leader who emphasized companionship and teamwork and would lead people to rebuild the world. Japhet was a kind guardian who made sure to eradicate fear. Enoch was to provide sweets because what child doesn't love some cake? He also created the queen who ruled over the universe. The queen is figuratively Hugo's mother, but since Hugo created her, Hugo is referenced as the queen's father in the book in Zone 2. The queen was to rebuild this universe but failed. Each zone and its leader fell to corruption and disarray. The queen thought to send some specters to try to do some damage control, but it was too late. The batter accuses the queen failed because she was too caught up in herself and her own motivations, not for the love of her child. This world wasn't meant to flourish, not when it was based on Hugo's mind, not with the lack of love in Hugo's life, his sickness, and his inability to leave his prison, not when the ruler was the very person who caused Hugo pain in the first place. As the world was crumbling, Hugo created the batter, a representation of Hugo himself. This version of him was smarter, wiser, and more mature than Hugo as a child. He didn't believe in childlike fantasies, of fake utopias and idealistic worlds. He was resolute and knew the solution was total purification. He was Hugo's desire to end it all. The batter was inspired by the comic his father gave him. As the batter goes through the room, memories of how the world and the Guardians came to be come back to him. When the queen tells the batter to go home, he replies, "That's what I did. This cradle is the home of my father." Father as in his creator, Hugo, just like the queen's. The final chapter is chapter 0, the batter, the beginning of the end. The batter faces Hugo, kills him, and tells him, "From now on, there will be no more darkness." As we head down the single path, the judge stops us, making us, the player, question what we've been doing this whole time. We felt like a passenger on this ride this whole time, doing whatever the story drove us to do, not questioning what we've been doing was wrong. It's up to us to choose the ending. The official ending is to end it all, and the special ending is for this pointless universe to live on. After digesting what I thought the story to be, I really had to take a step back and think of what the lesson of this game was. Is it really telling us that the solution is the end? That rather than live with the regrets, it's better to choose death? But then I thought, hang on, didn't I say in the beginning that it's up to me on how I interpret all this? Didn't the judge question me, the player, about my complicity in the narrative that led to all of this? The batter believes that everything is nothing and nothing is everything. And to that, after doing its bidding until the very end, I say, Well, fuck you. We shouldn't be beholden to the narrative. We don't have to be the Elson who became brainwashed, the Elson who lost their will. It's up to us, the player, to make the right and wrong choices as the controller outside the video game, to choose to go down the doomed path or not. To me, everything I experienced in this game meant something. I was hyper fixated on everything because of how strange, quirky, and abstract it all was. It wasn't all for nothing. To me, everything is something because we know the end is inevitable, and that's what I personally choose to walk away with. Before I forget, let's end this with a silly note by showing you the secret final third ending. This ending is apparently inspired by the Silent Hill gag endings, which is funny because my last video is on Silent Hill 2. But anyways, that's it. That's Off, one of the most bizarre indie games I've ever played in my life. A lot of the religious symbolism in this game honestly flew over my head because I'm just not super familiar with the Bible. But this random Tumblr post I found talks about how they think that Off is based on the Book of Revelation, and I thought this was really interesting to read, so I'll link it down below for you guys to read. If you guys have any other interpretations to share, please let me know in the comments. I would love to read them. There's a few really exciting horror games coming out in the next few weeks, so I hope to make my next video on a more recent release. Until then, thank you for watching.